Hello, welcome again to FAIRtax Power Radio. I'm Bob Paxton.
I'm Bob Scarborough.
And we are the FAIRtax Guys. There you go, Fat Albert and scrolling banner as we always have to start every program.
What a great, what a great concept, the visualization of that Fat Albert Rubik's Cube to represent the complexities of the tax code really is, when you stop and think about it, that's a pretty good one there, yeah.
Indeed. Well, hopefully people that are listening on an audio-only format will go to our YouTube archive, the FAIRtax Guys YouTube channel, and see kind of what we're talking about. But you look kind of lonely there. It looks like your whole staff has abandoned you this morning.
Well, yeah, and thankfully, the Carolina Classic Fair is the week we're wrapping up this weekend. In Winston-Salem, it runs generally the first weekend in October through the second weekend in October annually. And they had a calf born to one of the cows that was showing, one of the beef cattle that was showing out here.
Mercy.
And
yeah.
And so that was kind of exciting this year. And somebody, I haven't seen it yet. I'm going out later today. There's a pumpkin out there that's supposed to be like 700 pounds or something.
Oh, wow. Well, the radio station, of course, maintains a presence out there. The fair actually broadcasts from out there. And of course, by the time this episode streams, the fair will be long over. But we will mention right quickly before we get in that we will be doing a live FAIRtax Power Radio show from the radio station up there, WTOB in Winston-Salem, on Sunday, October the 19th, 8 o'clock in the morning. And of course, that will be videoed, and we will send that out on our regular video channels later. But that will be fun, and hopefully we can load up on Mr. Barbecue and oh, wait a minute. Wow. Cheer wine. Gotta have some.
Another North favorite.
All right, well, let's get going here on FAIRtax Power Radio. We got a long way to go and a short time to get there. So we will start, as we always do, with our Congress.gov segment, where we are shining a lot of truth on what the Congress critters are trying to do to the tax code. Let's see, we'll kind of go through this fairly quickly if we can, because I want to get to the little thing that you did. You'll have to explain what you did with the artificial intelligence again this time. We're going to start with S-2875. This is from Senator Sheehy of Montana, S-2875. He calls it the Choice Act. Choice Act. And you dig into it, and you see that it is a bill to amend the Internal Revenue Code to provide for the treatment of health reimbursement arrangements integrated with federal or individual market coverage. Let me read that again. To provide for the treatment of health reimbursement arrangements integrated with individual market coverage. Good deal trying to figure out what that's all about.
Oh, my goodness. And a lot of it is just to keep the lobbyists happy, and hopefully there would be some traction. But there's so much of that going on, it's hard to, you'd almost have to have two full-time staffers doing nothing but keep up with all of the different pieces of that puzzle, where people use the tax code to affect a positive response from the lobbyists.
Indeed. Let's keep going here. This is from Senator Gallego of Arizona, S-2867, called the Uplifting First-Time Homebuyers Act of 2025. And it is a bill to amend the Internal Revenue Code to increase the limitation on qualified first-time homebuyer distributions and for other purposes. I'm not sure where those distributions are coming from, but this bill wants to increase the limitation on qualified first-time homebuyer distributions and for other purposes.
Gotta love it. You got to have other purposes in there. It's something that I think is becoming commonplace in these submissions.
Okay, well, let's keep going here. This one goes in the Hall of Shame simply because it made me laugh out loud when I read it. What is this doing in the tax code? H.R. 5440 from Representative Menendez of New Jersey to amend the Internal Revenue Code to establish, get this, a tax credit for small businesses to provide diaper changing stations in restrooms.
Hey, you got to have it.
Can you imagine that is going to be part of the tax code if that bill passes to amend the Internal Revenue Code, establish a tax credit for small businesses? It's just so absurd that I can't keep it together.
Fortunately, there is no "and for other purposes" in this particular bit of legislation proposed.
No, I don't think so. A tax credit for establishing diaper changing stations in the restrooms of small businesses. What has our tax code come to? Mercy. All right, let's keep going. This Mercy. Is actually a couple of companion bills here. There's S40, check that, 2845, S2845. The companion bill to that is HR 5427. They do the same thing. This one ought to go in the Hall of Shame as well, but it says a bill to amend the Internal Revenue Code to eliminate tax loopholes that allow billionaires to defer tax indefinitely through planning strategies such as buy, borrow, and die, and to modify over 30 tax provisions so that billionaires are required to pay taxes annually and for other purposes. You can guess which side of the aisle that one came from, can't you?
Yeah, no doubt. Well, I mean, everybody up there is nutty anyway, and they all use the tax code depending on what their need is, I would think, and who they're trying to serve. Yeah.
Okay, one more for the Gibson, also from the Senate side. This is Lisa Murkowski in Alaska, S2824, to amend the Internal Revenue Code to extend the temporary enhanced premium credits. I have no clue what she's talking about, but apparently that's just more the instability of the tax code, full of these temporary measures that have to be either renewed or made permanent or whatever, but to extend the temporary enhanced premium credits. Good luck.
Yeah, good luck. That's what I would have said. Yeah, without a doubt.
Okay. All right. We have gone through that fairly quickly because I wanted to leave a lot of time to come up with your latest artificial intelligence, project here. So since you dug this up, go ahead and explain what you done with it.
A long time ago when we had to do term papers and things like that, we had to go to the library and copy everything out of books and look at study and get our bibliography together and all like that. Well, now with artificial intelligence, I used specifically ChatGPT. That seems to be the open source or the AI of choice for old people like myself. And there's plenty more out there, let me tell you. It's just, I'm just scratching the surface. But I asked, because we always talk about on the program, I asked ChatGPT, why do you think some of the citizenry, and definitely most, if not all, of the elected officials are against or forestall discussion on HR 25, the FAIRtax Act, and specifically its benefit of result being a tax on consumption replacing the income tax. So I asked that question, and it spit out a bunch of pages of information. And of course, because our time is of the essence for Bob P. and myself, I asked it to put it in the form of a radio show. And then I sent it to Bob P. for his review, and he added a bunch of stuff in there that basically will give us a path to go to say, okay, well, this is why the U.S. public doesn't necessarily understand it, or they don't think it's a good thing, and at the same time, politicians. So here we go.
So your AI raised the objections that people seem to have, and we're going to try to answer some of those objections.
Yes,
and it's kind of cool that Name the hosts up there, Maya and Ethan. As we read this script, I will be Maya, and you can be Ethan here. And it says, "Good morning. You're listening to FAIRtax Power Radio." So
Today, a hot button tax idea back in the headlines, HR 25, the FAIRtax Act. Supporters call it simple and fair, but a lot of Americans and a lot of members of Congress are not sold. We're going to unpack why.
all right. Well, quick baseline for folks if they've been living under a rock and don't understand what we're talking about. The FAIRtax HR 25 would replace federal income taxes, payroll taxes, estate taxes, gift taxes, all of that gone, replaced with a single federal retail sales tax levied on the purchase of new goods and services. And of course, if the income tax goes away, so does the IRS. So that is a huge structural shift in how Washington raises money if the FAIRtax passes.
Yeah, there you go. Huge is right. What are the big reasons people push back? And are these legitimate concerns? Let's start with what regular folks worry about.
Okay, well, first on the list is fairness. I mean, it's called the fair tax, but some people question the fairness thereof. They say that a national sales tax could be regressive, again, meaning that lower income households spend most of what they earn. So those lower income folks could end up paying a larger share of their income in tax than the wealthier households who save more. So in other words, that's just a plain language way of saying the fair tax could hit people who could least afford it the hardest.
Yes. And that's an argument that sounds logical on the surface, and a lot of people are trying to make it, but you have to look beneath the surface to see what is really going on. The fair tax isn't like the sales taxes that people are currently familiar with. The fair tax is the only sales tax on the planet that has a standard deduction. You don't pay the tax on your spending up to the poverty level based on your household size. A poverty level family that spends 100% of what they make pays no fair tax at all, none.
Okay, well, let's clarify this a little bit because the fair tax again is included in the price of the goods and services that people buy. So our poverty family will indeed pay the tax at the cash register when they buy things. But the rest of the story here, all of the tax they pay on their spending up to the poverty level is refunded to them in a monthly prebate. You don't take anything, nobody, regardless of how much or how little they make, nobody under the fair tax takes anything out of their own pocket to pay the tax until their spending rises above the poverty level.
Exactly. And the point a lot of people either miss or intentionally ignore when they try to paint the fair tax as regressive. And again, if you want to talk about regressive, the federal payroll taxes that fund Social Security and Medicare are among the most regressive federal taxes on the books. There's no standard deduction. The tax applies beginning with the first dollar a worker owns, and lower income wage earners pay the same rate as a wealthy individual.
That sounds like textbook definition of regressive. And also, those payroll taxes do not apply to the capital gains or investment income that a lot of wealthy families enjoy. So if you want to talk about a tax that falls disproportionately hard on low income earners, those payroll taxes are it. And the fair tax eliminates those horribly regressive taxes. So those people that are trying to paint the fair tax as a bad deal for lower income workers are just not telling the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
The second transition pain, imagine retirees who save their whole lives under the current system. Imagine this. When they spend those savings under a new sales tax, some say they could be taxed again. That's double taxation, or transition concern makes many voters uneasy.
All right. Well, we covered this not long ago, just a couple of weeks ago on FAIRtax Power Radio. But we will touch on it again. Again, this is another point. It sounds logical on the surface, but it just falls apart when you look at it more closely. Again, the money you pay for everything you buy today, from a bottle of aspirin to a new car, whenever you buy something, the money you pay for that item or service is taxable income to the person you're buying it from. So when you buy something, again, doesn't matter what it is, a portion of every dollar that you spend today for goods and services ends up at the IRS as the seller's income tax. And people just don't understand that.
Well, of course, you don't see it. You don't see on your receipt how much of that $15 you paid for a haircut ends up at the Internal Revenue Service as the barber's income tax. But when you get a haircut, you're paying a portion of the barber's income tax. And economists have estimated that 15 to 25% of the price of everything you buy today is tax costs being passed on to us, the retail consumers. But it's hidden. We don't see it.
Yes, absolutely. So what we have here is when the fair tax replaces the income tax, it eliminates all those tax costs that are currently hidden in today's retail prices. So what you're really doing, you're trading a lot of taxes that you don't see for a single tax that you will see on your receipt when the fair tax replaces the income tax.
And that's another thing people raise about the fair tax. They claim it will cause a dramatic spike in retail prices and make things horribly more expensive than they are today. It won't. It will not do that. As you said, you're just trading one tax for another, but that double taxation knock on the fair tax just is not valid. We have the same double taxation with the income tax. We just don't see it. It's hidden, but it's still there.
Okay, point three, enforcement and evasion. People are concerned about that. They say a high national sales tax rate could incentivize underground transactions, cash sales off the books, online work that goes underreported, stuff like that. All of that would make collecting the sales tax harder and could shrink expected revenue. What say you,
Yep.
my friend?
Oh, this one just makes me scratch my head and wonder how anyone could be so dumb, or maybe naive is a better word. The real uninformed. The real question when you're evaluating the fair tax is whether it's better or worse than the income tax it replaces. And on the question of evasion, it's not even close. Today, the Internal Revenue Service admits that illegal evasion of the income tax is costing the Treasury, get this, around $1 trillion every year. There's absolutely positively no way that evasion of the fair tax is going to be anywhere near that level.
Ah, mercy. I mean, how do you evade a tax that's included in the price of the things you buy? Now, I'm sure somebody's going to figure out a way to do it. Wherever there's a tax, there is going to be somebody that will figure out an ingenious way to evade it. But I'll tell you what, there have been economic studies done on this question that indicate the fair tax will reduce illegal evasion by 90 to 95%.
Because
That is close to $1 trillion we can gain just by eliminating the evasion.
absolutely, and of course we know that there are some conversations about uh, evasion with the fair tax. You have to have two people involved in the evasion in order for it to be a success. You have to have two people involved at that if it were to happen. 90 to 95%, that's incredible. Can you imagine that savings? On the question of huge black markets springing up, there's really not going to be any big incentive for that to happen. We touched on this briefly. The fair tax is not going to result in everything becoming 23 to 30% more expensive than it is today. People aren't going to be buying refrigerators out of the back of a pickup truck because the price in the store shot through the roof.
Currently, the big retailers, of course, you think Walmart and Amazon, folks like that. Those huge retailers account for a huge majority of the retail sales of this country. And I guarantee you that any black market operation that springs up can't possibly be anywhere near that big. So even if there are some black markets that will be minuscule compared to the overall retail economy, and of course that will be a negligible impact on revenue collection.
And on the question of enforcement, again, you have to compare the fair tax to the income tax. Enforcing income taxes require a massive federal agency known as the Internal Revenue Service. It has to check the accuracy of multiplied millions of tax returns, and it has to check those returns against tax laws that are incredibly complicated, vague, and constantly changing. It's an impossible task. It literally is.
Yeah, and on the other side here, the fair tax is going to be administered and enforced by the states, the great majority of which are already doing a state level sales tax, and much of that enforcement is automated. So it is just beyond ludicrous to think that the fair tax is going to require anywhere near as much enforcement effort as the income tax does.
And fourth, the math. Supporters claim a specific rate will be revenue neutral, but economists and analysts debate whether the proposed rate is sufficient and whether economic behavior changes would alter projected income. When the math looks uncertain, lawmakers get nervous.
Well, the short answer to that one is to point out that the fair tax was designed from the ground up, starting with a blank sheet of paper, designed by a noted team of economists who were charged with coming up with a tax system. One of the design parameters was that this new system had to be revenue neutral. And in order to achieve that goal and others, they spent over $20 million. And that was in 1993. I'm not sure what that would translate into in 2025 dollars. But $20 million worth of research was put in by this team of economists designing the fair tax to ensure that what they came up with meets all of the design goals and it would work as promised. So I kind of would take their word for it.
Yeah, I would too. They started with a clean sheet of paper. The economists could have set the rate higher, but their research indicated that 23% inclusive, meaning inside the price, would achieve revenue neutrality with the income tax system, which is what any proposal to change that method of collection is required to do. Many of the people arguing that the 23% inclusive rate is not sufficient are not fairly representing the fair tax.
Yeah, what they're doing is that they're claiming that the fair tax is going to have exemptions in it, for things like food and medicines. And of course, it's true. If you start granting exemptions to certain categories of products and goods and services, then the rate has to be higher on the remaining non-exempt items to achieve that revenue neutrality. But those exemptions do not exist. They just don't.
Exactly. The fair tax doesn't need those exemptions, because the prebate already ensures that people won't be taxed on their basic necessities. You are untaxed up to the poverty level. Again, the economists who designed the fair tax envisioned a tax that applied to the retail purchases of all new goods and services. And the rate they set wasn't just pulled out of thin air. It was scientifically determined by extensive research. Those claiming a higher rate will be necessary, don't necessarily have to anywhere near $20 million worth of research backing their claims. The higher rate is just out of thin air. There is no basis in fact.
So they're trying to make these claims with absolutely very little research and just their own opinions to back it up versus a team of economists that spent $20 million saying that what they do is going to work. That's great. Okay, so these are the four themes that you came up with: the regressivity, how the transition is going to happen, enforcement, and revenue uncertainty. They're really not just academic points. Polls have shown that Americans across the political spectrum are worried that they may pay more under that plan, and that has fed into some broad public skepticism of the fair tax.
I understand the skepticism, but I think a lot of citizens' concerns are based in a flawed perception of the fair tax. There are some extremely powerful special interests who profit from the current system and don't want to see it changed. So let's shift gears for a minute and look at why members of Congress are resisting the fair tax beyond just responding to voters.
Okay, well, several practical reasons here. One, winners and losers. I mean, tax overhauls create clear winners and losers in different industries, different income groups, and that turns on the lobbyists for sure. And the members say just they don't like to pick fights that could cost them votes or especially cost them campaign money.
Well, no doubt about that one. History has shown conclusively that members of Congress in both parties relish the power they have with the income tax to reward their friends with tax breaks and punish their opponents with penalties in the tax code. Presidents from both parties have used the Internal Revenue Service as a weapon against their political foes. The fair tax would rob them of that power because the Internal Revenue Service is going to be gone.
Absolutely. Well, I'll tell you, there's no doubt about this one. Politicians on both sides of the aisle now, this is not a partisan issue here. They are all hopelessly addicted to lobbyist cash. Now, maybe that's another issue that we need to address one of these days, but it has become expensive, just ridiculously expensive to run for Congress. I looked it up in the Federal Election Commission data. shows that congressional candidates, this is just the candidates, not the PACs and other things, just the candidates reported spending a total of $2.2 billion on their races in 2024. Again, that does not include PAC money. Divide that by 435 House races. That comes out to be $5.07 million it cost per race. And that's just the average. Some were a lot higher than that because they were significantly contested. The ones that just breeze through don't cost that much. But $5.07 million per race is what it costs to run for Congress. That's insane.
And over on the Senate side, candidates spent $1.5 billion over 35 races. That calculates out to an astonishing $42.86 million per race. That's just an average. Hotly contested races were significantly more expensive.
I'll tell you what we're going to have next week on FAIRtax Power Radio. Let's go back into opensecrets.org and look at actually some of the numbers, what the lobbyists are spending. So anyway, the fact that it's so expensive, being in Congress is the only job where you have to keep buying it. Every 2 to every 6 years, you have to buy your own job, and it's hugely expensive. No wonder that these guys are constantly courting big money donors, and of course, deep-pocketed lobbyists have been a major source of campaign contributions for decades. And I think, as we will find next week, taxes are one of the most heavily lobbied issues in Washington. So the Washington elites are opposing the fair tax because they want to keep selling tax favors to those lobbyists and burying those favors deep in the impossibly complex Internal Revenue Code.
Really is amazing. It's absolutely amazing what can be accomplished with the fair tax and how there's all this pushback. And we're kind of seeing why. Number 2, complexity and risk. Even though the fair tax touts simplicity, implementing a nationwide new collection program, working with 50 states, rewiring compliance, managing the transition is administratively risky. Lawmakers prefer reforms they believe they can implement cleanly.
Yeah, no doubt about it. The fair tax would indeed be a seismic shift in the way taxes are collected in this country, and some fear of the unknown is only natural, especially given that the fair tax is unlike any other tax collection system in the world. There is no real world example of just how the fair tax as it is written is going to work and what problems there may be with it.
Well, I'll point out a couple of things. First, Texas and Florida would be the 8th and 16th largest economies in the world if they were countries rather than states. Both economies are thriving without an income tax, so there's proof that a large political entity doesn't need an income tax to survive. Second, the fair tax will be administered and enforced by the states, and 45 of the 50 states are already enforcing a state-level sales tax. The infrastructure needed to administer and enforce the fair tax is already in place and working.
Well, a lot of Congress people are questioning the credibility of what the fair tax people are saying. They worry that the bill's benefits may be overstated, and if the promised growth or the promised revenue doesn't materialize, they're afraid of the political blowback. So that credibility risk is making some legislatures cautious of the fair tax.
Without a doubt. The probability of the promised growth or revenue not materializing is next to non-existent. Again, the economists who designed the fair tax spent over $20 million on research to prove that the fair tax will work as advertised. The fair tax is by far the most heavily researched tax proposal Congress has ever experienced and could be the most heavily researched legislative proposal of any kind that Congress has ever seen. The current Internal Revenue Code is hopelessly complicated patchworks of competing and conflicting provisions cobbled together over decades of wrangling between the two political parties. It's a miracle that the current system works at all.
Oh, yeah. Well, I tell economists all across the political spectrum, they all agree a consumption tax like the fair tax would be much better for the economy than an income tax. And several studies have indicated the fair tax would ignite unprecedented economic growth. Some see double-digit GDP growth within a really short time.
An economics professor, David Kendall, back in 2005, authored a letter to President Bush's Presidential Advisory Panel on Tax Reform urging adoption of the fair tax. 80 professional economists, including a Nobel Prize winner, signed on. Many others who agreed that the fair tax was a great idea did not sign on because they felt that the fair tax was not politically viable. Politically viable. Unfortunately, they were ignored.
Oh, mercy. Well, I am absolutely convinced that I'm afraid the fair tax won't deliver on its promises excuse is just that, a weak excuse, not a real reason to oppose the fair tax. And I think we've already hit on the real reason that Washington opposes the fair tax. The DC elites just don't want to give up the power and the lucrative campaign donation stream that the income tax affords them.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Partisan math is another sticking point. Even if one chamber wants it, tax law requires broad support to be durable. Without buy-in from the other party or enough moderates, it's a tough lift.
Yeah, I tell you, it's unfortunate that the fair tax has been caught in this, partisan crossfire because everybody, regardless of their political ideology, should like bringing home a bigger paycheck. Uncle Sam will no longer take a big chunk of your money before you get it when we have the fair tax instead of the income tax. Everyone, again, regardless of what their political position is, should like getting a tax refund every month. And most folks, again, regardless of their politics, should love never having to file a tax return again.
Can't imagine that people wouldn't want to experience that. The fact is that the fair tax is about raising revenue, period. There's nothing in the bill that helps or hinders either political side's agenda or spending priorities. It was written by economists, not politicians. And when it was first introduced way back in 1999, it had co-sponsors from both sides of the aisle. What has happened?
It's going to take support from voters on both sides of the aisle to convince Congress to pass it. And that's why we're here every week on FAIRtax Power Radio trying to preach the holy gospel here that we need to get rid of the income tax, yank it out by the roots, and replace it with a fair tax. And we have run a bit over time here. Our video presentation is not going to suffer, but you may have to edit this a little bit to fit the radio time slot. That was fun.
That was good. Yeah, consider taking this bit of information to your next roundtable meeting, maybe at your kitchen table or at your office or your favorite gathering with some of your friends and associates, and let them know the good things that can come from the fair tax.
Absolutely. Okay, well, that is going to wrap up this edition of FAIRtax Power Radio. Thank you again so much for watching, listening, and sharing the videos. That helps us a great deal. Until we meet again, same time, same channel next week, I'm Bob Paxton.
I'm Bob Scarborough.
We are the FAIRtax Guys, reminding you the fair tax is the only truly fair tax, and once you understand it,
you'll demand it.
So what would you do for her?
We've got several programs that will help her. We just need to find out how much she makes. But the good news is, the less she does, the more we can help.
Yeah.
If I may, with the fair tax, we wouldn't even tax her income. So the more she makes, the more she has.
But still, a consumption tax could eat up a lot of her income.
Which is why at the beginning of every month, we're actually going to give back all that she pays in taxes on basic necessities.
You're going to give her back her taxes?
Every month, on everything taxed on basic necessities. But we're also going to give it back to you and to every American citizen.
Why?
Well, we believe taxes should be fair.